If I feel connected to an organization, I'm going to feel even more impactful if I know that I'm just giving my money every month like that through this automated thing. And that's helping protect them in those drier months.
Yeah.
It's more rewarding to me than an individual gift.
Even as a donor, I think donors, especially that understand and think about the finances, they would be even more likely to think about things like, well, yeah, I want to make sure that the organization can rely on a resilient cash flow. Lisa Greer, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
You and I saw each other recently at a conference, and I was just thinking about in the weeks, we got this thing scheduled, and I was thinking about our conversation, and particularly your perspective, having come from, and we're going to dive into this today, but come from being a donor, a major donor to organizations, and then really seeing this kind of like, I don't know if you would call it broken, but I've certainly seen the word antiquated process. So tell me just a little bit about that. Like what caused you, it's always the like, what did you get into fundraising? But in your case, you had a very unique path. So just talk about that for a second.
So what got me into it? So the short story, the story is kind of long, but the short story is that I didn't grow up being a philanthropist. The word philanthropy wasn't used in our household, not because we didn't give, but we gave locally and Girl Scouts and things like that in school. But a philanthropist meant somebody who was sort of hoity-toity and not somebody we wanted to talk about. So that just wasn't a thing that we did. So as far as the ongoing major donor thing, we weren't major donors. We were very middle class and San Fernando Valley, and then one day, after many, many years of my husband and I both running businesses and doing jobs at both corporate and in the entertainment business, and then doing various different startups, we found ourselves in a position where we were about to become very wealthy and didn't know if it was going to happen or not. The story, like I said, is longer. It's in my book, or you can read it on my website. But we decided the first thing that we wanted to do was to give. I was very, very nervous because they had an IPO that was happening, and they said it might happen or not. And I owed a whole bunch of money to lawyers for getting this thing going. And I thought this thing has to work. So I was so nervous that I was like shaking. It was several days before. My husband was going to be leaving the next day for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days would be the IPO, and it would either be happening or it wouldn't. So I said, we're having this quiet moment alone. We have the kids in the next room. My twins were 5 at that point. And I said, you know what? I have a way to distract us at this point. And I think we need something. And I need something that I can work on and focus on while you're away so I don't lose my mind. Mm-hmm. So why don't we decide where our first donations were going to be? We didn't use the word gifts. We didn't know that was a thing. So he said, okay, fine. If that's what you want to do. I said, yeah, this is one of those moments where if this happens, we can give whatever we want to anybody we want. So why don't we figure that out? It didn't occur to me that everybody who was about to have money didn't have that conversation. I found that out later, but I thought that, of course, that's what you would do. And I'm sure you're the same way. It didn't occur to me that people didn't. And so it very strange. Anyway, but I decided that we would do two things. So I said, we have enough money. We can each pick something. So instead of us agreeing on something, why don't we each pick something? Okay. So Josh has had Crohn's disease since he's been 11 or 12, lots of surgeries, in and out of hospitals. And he said, I want to find out where the best research is being done in the country to eradicate or Crohn's disease, or at least make it better for people who have it. And he says, I want to make sure no child goes through what I went through. And I said, great. So we'll check with our local hospital where he had his surgeries. And otherwise we might go to Stanford. We didn't know, but he said, you do the research and find out, but that's what I want to do. Okay. And then he said, what do you want to do? And I'm the incoming chair at our synagogue and had been there for many years. Our kids had gone to nursery school there. I've been very involved. And I'm the new chair as of a few months after that. And I said, we had something that I was told by this development person we have who had come out of CCS that she said it was called a capital campaign. So that's what I was just told. There's this thing called a capital campaign, and we're doing one. And we had to raise $10 million, and we've raised 8.5 of it. We need another million. And then we had somebody at the beginning who said they'll give us the last 500,000. And the thing was being worked on. We were restoring our synagogue, and it was a big deal. And because I like checking off lists, and I thought, well, I don't want to start that owing this $1 million. That's going to be the most important thing for us to do. Why don't we give the final $1 million so that we can do other things when I'm chair? And so that's what we decided to do. And when I called the head of the synagogue to tell her on that Sunday that we had decided that we were, assuming the IPO happened, we were going to make this commitment, or we made the commitment now that as long as it happened, we would pay the $1 million to close the capital campaign. And so I pick up the phone and I make the phone call. Josh is sitting right near me, and I'm saying words that I never thought I'd say in my entire life, which was, "Hi, we're going to give you $1 million." So I did, and she didn't say anything. And I thought, oh, hello? What's going on with the phone? I said, "Hello, did you hear me?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, well, I don't understand what's happening." And she says, "Well, I don't know what to say." And I said, "I guess you could say thank you." And she said that. And she said, "I don't know if I can because I didn't make an ask." And at that moment, I thought I'd been transported to some Twilight Zone or Black Mirror type place.
Oh my goodness.
Where people don't say thank you. I didn't understand it. And then it was very awkward. And then we both hung up the phone. There was no thank you said. And about 20 seconds later, the phone rings. And this woman is one of the top feminist rabbis anywhere. I had all sorts of respect for her because of that. We were very good friends. And so the phone rings. And I thought, oh, that's just her realizing that she was really shocked. And so now she's going to say thank you. And I pick up the phone. Instead of saying thank you, she says, "Can I talk to your husband?" And I put my husband on the line, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he answers the phone, and she says, "Do you have any idea what your wife is doing?" And
okay.
So second part of that is now, where am I in a place where you don't say thank you?
Now I'm in offended territory.
Yeah. It was just very, very strange. So we hung up the phone, and with the hospital, when it took 7 months for them to accept a $2 million gift from us, because they didn't believe we had the money, because we had only had the money for less than a year, so we weren't in any well screens, so therefore we didn't exist. And we weren't regular donors. And so anyway, fast forward, I realized that this is very strange, and I had friends at nonprofits. I was at the synagogue. I knew about nonprofits a fair amount. I was on a few boards, had been on a few small boards. And I thought, this is a really strange business that I just entered. I don't understand how they do things this way. So I've got to find out more. So I did. And I found out these kinds of stories happen all over the place and to all sorts of different people. And I found out that there's people who don't think that you should have to say thank you. And I found out that there's just a lot of noise, and a lot of crazy things happen. And I didn't understand why, and it didn't make sense to me. But what I did know is I had been on the board of the Jewish Community Foundation here in LA for, 6 years at that point. And I knew that there were people all over Los Angeles who had, and even actually beyond Los Angeles, they came in. We had a cutting edge grant program, and they would come in once a year. We would have our finalists, and they were going to be applying for about $250,000 grant over 3 years. So I was on the committee that reviewed those. So I had seen dozens or hundreds of these people in front of me over the years. And at the same time, we had a person, the head of that organization was at lunch with my husband and was in this really bad mood. This is all around the same time. Mm-hmm. And Josh says, "How are you?" And he said, "Not well." And he said, "Well, why? What's going on?" And the guy said, "Well, so-and-so, this man, who very, very wealthy man in Los Angeles, had just passed away." And we said, "Yeah, we all knew he passed away. We knew his son, we knew his grandkids, whatever." And he was about 96. He'd been in a wheelchair. And so we thought, oh, okay, that's sad. And he said, no, you don't understand. About 60% of our revenue came from him. And then I thought, what? That can't happen. Isn't that irresponsible? And then I thought, wait a minute. If 60% comes, and if there's a second guy that comes in and 80% of your revenue is gone, or 90% of your revenue is gone, and all of these organizations that I've been seeing coming in front of me are going to have to go out of business. And I can't bear to see that happen. So I decided I had a responsibility at that point because I could see it, and I could see it coming down the line because I looked to see what are the ages of the other big investors in Los Angeles, the big donors, and they were all in their 80s. And so I said, no, I've got to make a change here before the bottom falls out. So here I am.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so much there to unpack. Number one, the series of unfortunate events, which in reality you realized was a pattern, not just in your personal life, but in philanthropy in general. Which, by the way, as an aside, philanthropy, right? Not knowing that, using that language as a child, I think even today, philanthropy does have some connotations that are unfortunate, and so I think a lot about generosity. We have Sustainable Generosity podcast, right? That's what we think about. But so you wrote a book. You wrote 2 books. We'll come to that. But the Philanthropy Revolution: How to Inspire Donors, Build Relationships, and Make a Difference. So this is the first book written on philanthropy from a donor's perspective. So just what is the thesis of the book? Let's start there.
So it's 2 things. Part of it is the story of me going from person who knows nothing to really getting into the nitty-gritty of different organizations, having lots of experiences over that next 2 or 3 or 4 years, and really getting involved with each organization to say, not just I'm sitting on a board, but gee, I want to talk to your fundraiser. I want to know why you do things that way or why you do things that way. And it was because I also needed to keep telling myself that I wasn't the only one this was happening to, because otherwise I was having it be complex. So I kept finding this out over and over again. So part of it is my story, because I realized, as somebody who has been through an IPO and all of a sudden became wealthy, that was not uncommon. And the idea that they didn't bother looking online at the publicly available materials, financial reports, to see if there had really been this IPO and there was really money, they didn't bother that. They just looked at the wealth screens, and I wasn't on it, therefore I didn't exist. And I thought, what about all the other people who all of a sudden have money and they want to give and they're treated like they don't exist? That's a problem. And maybe I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment. And I said, you know what? I'm willing to have people kind of beat me up so that people like that are actually listened to at some point. So that, and by the way, the banking, the wealth management guys, the real estate guys, they all started calling the day after the IPO. I got phone calls all day long, but the nonprofit world didn't call for about 1.5 years. So because we weren't in those databases. And so I said, I don't want to have anybody who's all of a sudden has money. I don't want to have anybody who wants to give being discouraged on giving. I think that's just wrong.
Well, and you were in your own journey of kind of generosity, right? Like you said, it wasn't necessarily like philanthropy wasn't necessarily a topic of conversation around the dinner table. And then I love that story of you and your husband and your kids, and that moment of like, I think this is going to go through, which I can't even imagine the feelings in that week or 2 or months, But then I love the fact that you immediately started to think about, okay, well, what would we do to make a difference, right? And so you're in that infancy, that sort of early sort of moment to going to a whole new level of maturity and generosity and all those things, to then have the awkward experience of like, I did not ask you, so am I allowed to say thank you? Like, what does that even mean, right? So one of the things you talk about is this idea that, fundraising, the way that a lot of fundraising is conducted is antiquated, inefficient, or unsustainable. So let's start with, why is the current model of fundraising unsustainable?
Well, I'm actually a student at the Lilly School that I think you know, and I'm doing my dissertation project there on the nonprofit starvation cycle. So that's a big reason why it's unsustainable.
Do tell. What is the nonprofit starvation cycle? I've actually not heard this term.
Oh, seriously? Okay, so it was coined in, I'm going to forget this now, I think originally 1996, and then again it was in the Stanford, the SSIR in 2006. And it's the idea that nonprofits are resource deprived, and donors are a big part of that, saying, oh, no, I only want to spend money on program. And the organizations themselves start saying, oh, donor, you can do whatever you want to do. Of course, we'll change our mission for you because we just need the money so badly. And it makes you that idea, it creates a time where nonprofits make bad decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and they also don't pay their people a living wage. They don't pay fundraisers well. Fundraisers go, as most of your uh, listeners know, about every 16 months, on the average, they're leaving their position. So I thought, from a donor's perspective, I don't want to give you money if I know that you don't have any reserves and you don't pay people well and your fundraiser is going to disappear and you've got to go spend money all over again, that you shouldn't have to. You should pay them a living wage and a decent wage, a competitive wage,
Yeah.
so that they stay. And the same with the other people. So that was, so that was a big piece of this, this kind of thing that I was doing. Yeah.
Okay. So what does sustainability in fundraising mean to you?
It means having enough resources to keep going, and having not only resources that you need right now, but resources that you might need in the future. So meaning reserves, meaning the ability to do strategic planning and not have to always worry about, we don't have money for the next month. I've heard some horrible statistics. Between half and 3/4 of all nonprofits, I don't have more than 2 months at the most of reserves available. And I just feel for the people who run those organizations,
Mm-hmm.
like this could just, you could just have to go literally out of business at any moment. And and that's not good for the people who you're you're helping. It's not good for your board members who think they're doing something good. It's not good for the world. It's not good for anything. And to be skating on the edge like that for such a long time is a real problem. And so the starvation cycle is one where it just keeps going. You keep making bad decisions. You keep doing the same thing because you don't have enough money to put into infrastructure. You don't, and I learned this when I was at the synagogue. You don't have enough money to pay the appropriate amounts for insurance that you need. You don't have the money to make sure that the area that you're at is completely safe and up to current code standards. And you don't have any of that. So we can't keep going that way. It doesn't make any sense. And again, from a regular perspective, business person's perspective, it makes no sense. But from a donor's, it's like, well, I might as well throw my money out the window then.
Yeah. Well, and it's literally not sustainable, right? That term, right? And it can become this kind of negative downward spiral where one thing leads to another. It's so interesting how many charities actually work in issues of poverty and social issues, and they see that in their constituents that they're working with, right? And then when you can't afford the insurance or you can't take care of yourself, or you get behind in the bill, and you see these cycles that create, it's fascinating to think about how charities can themselves be then caught in cycles.
It's horrible. It's horrible to think that they're helping people who might be in the position that they could be in 2 or 3 months because they don't have enough money to pay what they need to pay.
Wow. Okay. So I have just something that I've been thinking about, and I'm noticing. I just got off the phone with a client that I'm working with on their sustainable giving program. And they said, we've got $5 sustainers. We've got $1,000 sustainers. I had one client just recently do a campaign, Lisa, for their, recurring giving program. They had a donor sign up for $5,000 a month.
Wow.
I recently spoke about that at a conference, and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, we have a donor that gives $50,000 a month. And I said, on their credit card? And they said, yes. I said, number one, their limit's great. And number two, somebody's getting a lot of airline miles.
Wow. That's fantastic.
And so I'm just fascinated, and maybe this isn't something that you've seen yet, but I'm just curious from your perspective as a major donor, as somebody who's deeply passionate about connecting people of wealth to charities, but also just creating more health and more sustainability in the ecosystem, like observations on that. Like, are you seeing anything like that, or just thoughts? I mean, the way I always like to say is major donors are subscribers too.
Yeah. I am probably one of the biggest proponents out there of monthly giving at recurring donor programs. When I thought it made a lot of sense. I understand the subscription sort of culture and that you put your credit card down, and it's very hard to get the credit card away from somebody once it's down, but it's hard to get you to give them. But once they do, they usually don't cancel it. And I myself give money to a lot of different things, and both, my cable bill and also for to nonprofits. I was was and continue to be shocked that most nonprofits by far do not, either they don't have a monthly giving program or they kind of hide it somewhere and it gets no respect. It's sort of like the Rodney Dangerfield, I guess, of the
no,
nonprofit.
no respect.
It's like, oh no, that's for those little people. So when the Neon One report on recurring giving came out a year ago, March, it kind of blew my mind because it confirmed a lot of things that I sensed, but it also it made it very, very clear that with their 100,000 people or whatever it is that they queried, that this is something that every organization should be doing. And the reason why, and I collected the reasons why people didn't do it even before this report. And the reason that I always heard is, no, those are like the little people. They're like the volunteers. They're like, you don't want to be part of that. And I also heard that if you promote it, they're not, I've heard this even recently. If you promote a monthly giving program, that person to an existing donor, a one-time donor, annual donor, that they won't give the money. They'll give the money to the recurring giving program, and they won't give you the big money.
Like they're gonna downgrade your major donor because they chose to give $100 a month or $500 a month or whatever.
Yeah, and on one of your recent podcasts, you were talking to the head of, is it Nicole Noel, who's the head researcher for Neon One?
Oh yeah, Abby. Yeah,
was it
the
Abby?
generosity report?
Anyway. Yeah. So she also was doing that for the recurring giving report, and she said, I'm pretty sure it was her that said that when they found that when a lot of organizations put together their current file and list of donors, and they look at previous donors to decide who they're going to solicit, they actually, and she gave examples of, they actually negate anybody who's a monthly donor because we're sort of, as we would say, chopped liver. So I thought that was scandalous and horrible and couldn't believe it, but I unfortunately do believe it. I just think it's very short-sighted. But so I believe in a world where everybody's a sustaining donor at some point, and for a lot of those reasons, I think there's ways that you run the program. I think you create an organizational name for them. It becomes like a club. I know that they are much, much more sticky, much more likely to stay with you. They stay with you, the report said, over 8 years. And most people, it's a year and a half if you're a one-time donor. So why wouldn't you want to, have those people around? Why wouldn't you want to work with them? Why wouldn't you want to do everything you can to show your appreciation that they're involved, and to maybe get them involved in other things? So why would you not, why wouldn't you? And some people say, well, we have to give them something. No, you don't have to give them anything. And I've worked with a lot of organizations who had that same question. You can give them some little thing that's a surprise. The best way to deal with this, and I love your opinion on it, is, so you have some sort of a name. I'm one of the something followers or whatever, a cute name. So you're part of that club, and that club gets special things. They might get a special webinar or something at some point. But also, if all of a sudden you're doing some event and you find out that you have 500 extra of something or 100 extra of something, and you just surprise them and say, hey, was just thinking about you, wanted to send you this, and we just want to say thank you for continuing to be a supporter. And I think that's wonderful. And you don't have to do it every month. It shouldn't be expected. It should be, because they don't join you to get a T-shirt. Nobody does that. I don't think. Most people don't do that. I think public radio sometimes, but they're very, they want to be connected with you. And I think you have a job to connect with them.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about major donors, and the thing I want to really accentuate for folks, because I have not seen a single piece of data that indicates that it's somebody who gives of means, of wealth, and they give larger amounts, that choosing to give on a recurring basis will decrease their overall giving. In fact, every client that I've ever looked at, the average that I see is about 25% on top of any of their recurring giving. And if you think about it, it's not that hard to, it's like, well, if somebody believes in a cause so much that they want to give on a monthly or even a recurring, quarterly or whatever the basis is, they're going to sign up to give on an automated basis. They're more bought into your cause. They're more aware of your cause. Right. And, as I've talked to organizations and looked at the data, it's like, no, actually, major donors are recurring donors too. In fact, most of the programs that I look at, Lisa, they're not fixed on a certain price point. They might mention some amounts like, oh, well, $42 does this, or $100 does that, or $500 does this. But I generally, not all the time, but most of the time, encourage like, hey, let the donor choose what's comfortable for them. Because for
Yeah.
some donors, that might be $1,000 or $2,500 a month, and that's just their kind of like, hey, I understand, that this is something that the organization needs, and yes, I'm still going to consider a year-end gift, or when we close the books on our business and we know where we're at, and we want to give additional or whatever. But it's interesting to hear that, from your perspective in the space that you're in. If you've been listening this far, then it might be safe to say that you're looking to grow sustainable giving at your organization. You might have been following trends and noticed the growth of recurring and giving across the sector. You might also be frustrated with the lack of growth in your own program, or you might be growing and have a sense that there's more opportunity to be tapped into. In any case, you are in the right place. The Sustainable Giving Growth Blueprint is a guide designed to help organizations cultivate a thriving recurring giving program. This blueprint outlines 7 essential steps that will empower you to navigate the journey towards sustainable growth. Get started by downloading your blueprint today at sustainablegiving.org. You'll gain valuable insights, practical strategies, and actionable recommendations to unlock the full potential of your recurring giving program. Again, you can get that blueprint at sustainablegiving.org.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I also think that donors are not dumb. Most donors, everybody's not super smart that has money, but a lot of them have had money and know what that's like. And we realize that it does take money to run an organization. And I don't want to support an organization that has a crappy accountant. I don't want to support an organization that has no reserves. No one talks about that, but a lot of them have that situation. If I also learned along the way that most nonprofits have, it's not a big surprise, but I learned it very explicitly, that most nonprofits between March, April, May, June, those kinds of months, that's their low time. And a lot of nonprofits have to use their credit line during that time.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, it works out. That's kind of a standard practice for a lot of people. So if I feel connected to an organization, I'm going to feel even more impactful if I know that I'm just giving my money every month like that through this automated thing. And that's helping protect them in those drier months.
Yeah.
And so I became, it's more rewarding to me than an individual gift. Now, if they then call me in October and they say, hey, we need money for this thing, or, God forbid some disaster has just happened. Can you do that? Of course I can, because I'm already connected with them. But I'm much more connected than I am with the people that are once a year.
So powerful. And you, as a donor of means, there is an element of, you've got the business background, you're familiar with cash flow, you understand that is a reality, that if whatever my business had all of its orders in 1 month at the end of the end of the year, then you would have to have some strategies around cash flow. And so even as a donor, I think donors, especially that understand and think about the finances and the reserves and those sorts of things, they're even more, it seems to me, they would be even more likely to think about things like, well, I want to make sure that the organization can rely on a resilient cash flow.
Right. So somebody came to me and said, look, we want to start a new program where we're going to pay our fundraisers 30% more than we've been, so that we can get really good fundraisers who will stay. But we're not going to we don't have the money in the bank right now to pay for that. We're going to need another whatever X $10,000, 20, whatever it is, or X amount of dollars a month to be able to do that. I think I would absolutely participate in that, unless assuming I like the organization. And I think anybody else I know who's a donor would also want to help in that way, because it actually helps us. It helps us as donors not feel like we're throwing our money away. It helps us as human beings feel like you're doing the right thing for a person. And from a completely business point of view, it just makes sense for sustainability. So why would I not do that?
Okay. Can I get some Lisa Greer consulting right now with this?
Sure.
Can we do some live podcast consulting? Okay. So I've got an organization that I'm working with. And one of the things that they're facing is they're a startup. So they're on the journey right now. They have an inordinate amount of people giving on a recurring basis. which is impressive. Like the percentage of recurring revenue is great and growing, but they're in startup mode. So they're still south of let's just say their cash flow where they need to be, and their actual ongoing income is there's a deficit, right? So they need to raise, let me think of what the actual number is, because this is a very small organization. So they need to raise a net, let's just say they need to raise a net $8,000 a month.
Okay.
Small numbers, right? But just to give you some concretes. One of the things we're talking about is what would it look like to just go to some local donors to say, hey, we want to raise a fund of just a couple $100,000, which is huge to this organization, right? But if we can raise this fund, then we can actually use this fund as basically a cash flow mechanism over the next 3 years. Then that organization, while it's growing, while it's building its base and and building its infrastructure or whatever, they're not stressed. They're not in that starvation cycle. So that they can actually have the healthy runway to not just be like desperate for money all of the time, to do the programs that they need to do. Yeah. How would you even approach yourself on that? Like, how would you approach a donor on that?
So my opinion is that you approach the donors are human beings, and that we're all donors. Everybody has given something at some point. It doesn't matter what your resources are. Somebody has given the coat off their back. Somebody has given a meal to somebody. Everybody's given something. So I already want to make the look like this is, and we're not a homogenous group, but that everybody's a donor in some way. Some have a little bit more than others. So you know what? Let's just assume that a donor is not an alien. And so once you get over that, then it's sort of, how would I feel? That's the question I ask everybody to ask themselves. How would I feel in that situation if somebody came to me and asked that? And I would be super impressed that they were paying attention to their finances. I can tell you that right away. And I think most other donors, certainly if they have a business background, would feel the same way, that, because with this lack of trust in the industry, there's a lot of people who think, well, they don't even look at their books. They don't even know how much things cost. Part of my master's project is going to be on, do the fundraisers and the organizations actually know what overhead means, and do they know why it's important? And I don't think they do. And so we're checking into that. And so if they just came and said, I need money to do better as an organization, and this is specifically what I need, it's a rotating, revolving kind of a line during the year, and we might have to spend some of the basis of it, the corpus fine, but you're talking $100,000 a year, I think most donors would say, absolutely, I'll do it.
And the thing I want to accentuate, because there is this question of like, well, we don't have a really cool new project to say your fund is going to go to this. No, we're actually saying, would you give it, because you understand how this works, we want you to give a chunk of change to basically help offset expenses for the next 3 years, so that we have the runway to build the really cool programs and do all those sorts of things. That wouldn't be just like, no, I want to give to buying the new blankets for everybody or whatever whatever.
Yeah, I don't think most donors are not all over like, I need my name on something, but it gives you internal pride to feel like you're helping them out when they really need something, as opposed to this program thing, the idea that you need a program to bring money in. I don't agree with it. I think because if you don't have the infrastructure, then, if you're going and sailing along fine, you've got plenty of money, you've got plenty of resources, and you want to add a program, sure, let's go talk about the program. Yeah. But if you don't, which is the case in most organizations, then you need to, somebody explained this to me really well the other day. They said, it shouldn't be called overhead. It should be called the basis. It should be called the base thing, because it doesn't matter when you do your programs on top of it. They are going to fall apart if there is no base. There is no. Isn't that great?
How is it that I have been in fundraising for 21 years, Lisa, and the first time I've heard of this idea is right this moment?
There you go. You know why people don't talk about it? It's not fun to talk about.
It's programs the basis. Yeah, this is where we're operating from.
This is the place where we are the foundation of. Yeah, and without the foundation, if the foundation is crumbling, it really doesn't matter what your programs are. And so that's that. Unfortunately, when the 990s happened, started 20, 30 years ago, where people started looking at them with the, with the charity navigators and guides, et cetera, of the world, people started looking at that and they said, no, we don't know how to value these nonprofits. So why don't we, the only thing that makes sense to us is let's value them by by what their costs are and what their overhead is. But if somebody had said to them, and this is part of what I personally am working on over the next several years, I am going to try to get people to start changing the way that they think about evaluating nonprofits, and that they have to get rid of the overhead thing, because if you don't have a sustainable organization, and you know this better than anybody, then the rest of it doesn't make any sense. It's just crazy.
So good. Okay, let's talk about boards. You've written quite a bit, and I'm sure that's an area of passion for you. You've served on many boards. Yep. But I'm going to give you a very concrete example, and then I want you to just kind of respond to it. I have sat on board, and I am on multiple boards as well, but I've sat on boards where business people on the board are hammering on overhead. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, are you saying that you wouldn't spend money on marketing or advertising or infrastructure in order to invest in your business so that you can grow it? What is it about, even when somebody that understands business and wealth and cash flow and all those sorts of things that gets on a board and they like take off their like business hat of like, how would I think about investing in and growing and funding my thing and profit margins and all those things? They seem to take all of that off and then put on the I am now a board member at charity XYZ hat. Why are we spending money on blank? So speak to that.
Okay, so it sort of became the thing you do. Again, there wasn't something else to value organizations on. People don't trust. You have a scandal here and there, and people don't trust nonprofits. There's a big issue with that, and so they just do a default, and the default is let's pick at them with their overhead, because they must be getting private planes to go deliver their resources all the time. They must be doing this and that, and it's just not true with most nonprofits. But because there wasn't another thing anyone had suggested to value nonprofits by other than overhead, they just kept doing it. And I think board members it's so pervasive in our culture that, and by that, it's not just here, it's all over the world, that that's just the default of if I'm responsible, I'm going to make sure that they spend as little as they can.
Yeah. Okay. So you've recently actually said that a board can be your strongest ally or your biggest obstacle. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, this gets into all sorts of other things, but your example actually is fantastic. Like, if you have a board that doesn't understand why you need a foundation, and meaning a base to keep things going, then you've got a problem. That board member probably shouldn't be on your board. But most boards I talk to, or almost all boards that I talk to, tell me that they have board members, especially the ones that still have some of the friends and family from the early days on the board, just don't want to give money, period. I'm giving you this. I don't want to give money. And I believe that I just did this for one of my clients. We did a wonderful thing where we created a give or get, which I think is fine. I've certainly been in the position of not having money, and I get that.
Yeah.
But that still everybody has to put in some money. Everybody has to, give a $100 donation, give a $50 donation. And if you won't do that, then you shouldn't be on the board. So that's another piece. We've also heard stories of, this is another problem. If you need your board to be your biggest cheerleaders. And I am pretty convinced that if you grabbed a number of random boards and you went to other people and you said, okay, here is our mission statement. Here's what we actually do. And how would you describe that to a friend at a cocktail party? That most of them would not be able to do that. And it's funny. I remember in the play Book of Mormon, there's this whole thing where they're explaining Mormonism, and then the crazy guy says, oh, we just do this thing and it's really great because we want, Jesus Christ to be on vacation, or he says some crazy thing, and I no, that's like that's not it. So it needs to be you need the board. I don't think a board member is of value if they can't tell you what your organization does. And if they can't tell that to some random person at a cocktail party. If they're not doing that for you, that's a problem. It also means if they don't understand what you do, then they won't understand why you need money for overhead. So I think that's a big problem.
How can leaders then work with their boards to create more sustainable organizations?
Yeah, I think that the boards need to understand exactly what we just talked about. They need to understand the finances of the board. They need to understand how it works, what the reality is. And unfortunately, the culture says, and the norms say, that if you are a board member, you are typically a donor. And if you are a donor, you should be shielded from all of that uh, 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 money stuff and all anything that's bad. You should never hear anything that's bad. So,
Hmm.
and
Ooh,
that's pretty much been the way at
drill
every
down
board I've
into
ever.
that. I've sat on boards where, yeah, you're like, wait a second, I didn't know, the cash flow was upside down. Like, we should probably, one, fiduciary wise, we
They
should
don't.
know that. But
They don't
even
want to tell
fundraising,
you.
yeah,
Yeah, and even though you're fiduciary, they just don't want to tell you because they feel like you won't donate to them anymore. And that's so the donor part trumps anything else that you are as a human being. So because that's the most important. We can't lose a donor. We can't lose a donor.
okay,
So we're not going to tell. And what I say to them is to those organizations is not only yes, you can lose a donor, but you're not going to lose a donor if you tell the truth. If you are lying to them, if you are saying I am not going to tell you any of this stuff because I don't want to lose the money, that donor is going to be really pissed off when they find out you didn't tell them. And it's irresponsible for you to not tell them. But the more important thing is that this lack of trust, this trust thing. If somebody tells me everything's hunky dory, same thing is, your kid comes back from school. Everything's great, Mom. How was your test? Oh, and great. It was great. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
tell me
I'm sure
exactly
it
what
was.
happened. Yeah.
Okay, Lisa. So I've got another one or two questions I want to ask you. But
Yeah.
what would you say to a leader today that's like, yeah, I'm feeling that right now. Like, I feel like my board is not my strongest ally. I realize this is not a tips and tricks, like 2 things, and then you'll do it. But what would you say
Yeah.
to that leader right now?
Yeah. Right now, you would have a conversation with them and see if you can find out one-on-one. Why are you on the board? What do you like about it? What don't you like? What were you here for? And what is it you'd like to do? And really prompt them a little bit because a lot of them really want to get their hands dirty and they're told they can't do that because they're a board member. A
Hmm.
lot of them wish that they didn't waste as much time at board meetings. And why do we have so many meetings? And you can discuss that and say, this is an issue that we should discuss. This is something we can fix. Some of them might just say, we don't like the other people on the board, which you have to deal with. That's very, very possible. Or we don't feel like you have substantive leadership. That's important also. But you need to find out what is their motivation for being on the board and how do they feel about it. And I think also a lot of nonprofits don't want to ask those questions in depth because they don't want to hear that a donor is upset because then they think that the donor is going to leave. So if they realize more that we want to protect your investment and you as a board member are here to actually help protect the investment of everybody else, who we work with and your fellow board members, it'll kind of blow their mind because no one ever talks about that. I do think that if there are board members that are dragging you down and you have a conversation and they're just not into it, then one of the best things I think you can do is you create an ambassadors board. That I use that name because I like it. There's other names that you
Sure.
can use and you move them over and you say, look, here's this other opportunity. What would you say if I told you could be on a board, and have your name on whatever it is, but you didn't have to have any fiduciary responsibility and you didn't have to
Right.
come to meetings? And most of them would say, cool, I want to do that. So you put them on this and you say, your entire job is to be a cheerleader. And of
So
course,
fun.
then most nonprofits will say, what if they don't give the big money anymore? But you know what? For every donor that you're worrying about that much, there's 5 donors that you're not even talking to because you're so busy fretting over the one.
Well, I've never thought about this before, but if you think about building your team, it's like, how do we get people in a place where they're getting to use their gifts at the highest and best use, but also they're like engaged and enjoying it. Like, I'm such a huge fan of understanding people's natural gifts and then finding places for them to plug in. And I do think sometimes it can just sort of just kind of by, I don't know, like inertia, like I guess we need to ask them on the board now because they're a big donor. It's like, well, do you? Or is there other actually more fun, more engaging ways for them to be involved with the cause without sitting in? And I have, by the way, been on boards where I'm like, I understand basically my job is governance and like finance and stuff. Like, I would have way more fun if I could just be the like marketing guru that you ask every once in a while, right? Like, there are ways to leverage people's gifts and talents that don't have to, involve the actual, like you said, fiduciary board seat.
Well, so I had a conversation with one of these boards that I'm helping earlier today, and they said, "Well, we don't feel like a lot of our board members are really involved. They don't want to roll up their sleeves." And I said, "Well, okay." But then later in the conversation, they said, "Well, we want to understand why these people aren't coming to meetings, and we want to, find out what they want." I'm like, "Well, first of all." and this is for your one person that you were asking, you just ask them how they feel, ask them what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's really a big piece of this, is just talk to them like a human being. And most of them will talk to you, and you'll get a sense along the way. I think the other thing about boards is it's important to have diversity on a board. And I don't mean just diversity, any kind of diversity, but I read this the other day, we're talking about board diversity, that people who say we don't want younger people, first of all, they say we don't want younger people because they don't have any money. Okay, well, there's about, by my last calculation, about 1.2 million millennial millionaires in this country right now, maybe more. So then they'll say to me after I say that, yeah, except they don't have any money. So I just told you they have money. So,
Yeah.
And no one's approaching them. So why can't you get that through your head? So they don't want to have somebody under 40 on their board. But the interesting thing that I read is, so then when you have a tech thing that you're dealing with, and you've got a bunch of older people, and you have this resource right there in your board that's a younger person who's a digital native, that's like worth gold to you. That's like, like how could you have a board and have a lot of things working based on technology and not have somebody who understands technology? That doesn't make any sense. The answer I would get back is, well, they're under 40, they have no money. So age diversity is important, background's important, all of those kinds of things. And the reticence to change that board composition, comes from really what you were talking about a moment ago, which is the answer that most people have for those kinds of dilemmas, which is when you say, why do you do it that way? They say,
because it's always been done that way.
That's right.
Just a guess.
And that's it. And so what I tell fundraisers is, look at every single thing you do in your nonprofit, and every single piece, every procedure, and you think about, why is it done that way? And nobody knows the answer. Then you need to go look at that and see why it was done that way.
I think there's something that's really striking me about this conversation, and I have one more question I want to ask you in a minute, but about your number one, your just sense of common sense. Like, let's just be normal human beings here. And I've said this before, but I think there's something to be said, and I've noticed this in my career, Lisa, where sometimes you put on like a hat, like you maybe don't consciously think like, oh, I'm now a fundraiser, or I'm now a board member, or I'm now a whatever, but you sometimes then are taking off like, just, I'm a human being with like feelings and like experiences. And so, like I said, when the business member who totally understands investment and return and like having to spend money to make money and all those things says, but no, right now I'm sitting in the board seat on the charity, so I'm just going to grill every basis foundational expense as opposed to overhead. Or I've been the fundraiser where I'm like, no, I'm doing a fundraising strategy right now, so this is the way we do it. And I'm like, but would a human, like, if I put my human hat on for a second,
you're right.
Like, and so that strikes me. And I think more people, and especially when you're not in the organization, I think that's why you're such a blessing. And the books, plural, by the way, we will link to both of them, Philanthropy Revolution and Essential Fundraisers Handbook. It is getting a little bit of an outside the perspective, because sometimes, what's the phrase? You can't read the label from inside the jar.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm just grateful to you for you taking this passion on, right? You didn't have to do this, but this is something that, one thing led to another, and you have made really a significant part of your life's work. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm hoping I'm moving the needle a little bit. I keep trying.
Yeah. Well, I think we need these voices, and I'm super excited to have the podcast to be able to shine a light on these voices. I mean, we've talked about sustainable giving today, but we've also talked about sustainability and about your board. And so the last question I want to ask you is, if there's a nonprofit leader today that's listening and they feel both convicted and inspired, hopefully both, what's one word of encouragement you would offer to them?
That I think I would say, you're doing this because you have a passion. I have to assume that the person I'm talking to has a passion for what they need to do. And you need to see this through. The most important thing you can do is use resources around you. We're here to help. A lot of us are here to help. Make use of people that are here to help, because we want you to be successful. If you're successful, the rest of us are successful. If you're successful, we make impact, and we have a positive impact. And isn't that what we're all here for? I think that would be exactly what I would say to them.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you. I think that's a great place to end. Keep your human hat on, everybody. Common sense is a blessing. It's something that we can sometimes, all of us are guilty of putting aside. And so I appreciate you, Lisa. Thanks for sharing with our audience.
Sure.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with some powerful tools that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For more information about the topic and to take the Sustainable Giving self-assessment, visit us online at sustainablegiving.org. While you're there, you can pick up your copy of The Rise of Sustainable Giving, your guide to growing recurring giving. And hey, would you do me a favor? If a person comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you mind sharing this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference that they need to start growing sustainable giving for their own organization. And there's one other thing that you can do that would be a huge blessing to me. I've timed it and it takes just 16 seconds. Would you consider rating the show? Just head to the show page on the app of your choice, and if you've enjoyed this show, hit the 5-star review. Bonus, if you want to leave a comment, I would love to hear what you think. Special thanks to the entire team at Imago Productions for bringing this show to life. Abigail, Christine, Grace, Kirsten, and Tom, this would not be possible without you. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and keep inspiring generosity.